A dark and ancient tale introduces a vengeful witch who was drowned at sea on a moonless night. It is said that her children were taken from her, and an old prophecy foretells that she will rise again to claim the children of others. The scene then shifts to a woman named Sarah, who has been found adrift among the wreckage of a sailing boat and is rescued by the Coast Guard. Sarah, along with her 2 daughters, is placed in police custody, where Detective Clarkson interrogates her. Concerned for her children's safety, Sarah asks about their condition, and Clarkson assures her that they are safe. Clarkson encourages Sarah to explain the events of that day. Sarah responds by stating that evil requires a physical form to inhabit, and in their case, that form was the boat. However, she struggles to fully accept what happened on board. Despite her reluctance, Clarkson urges her to share her story, prompting Sarah to recount the events. The story then flashes back 4 months to when the Coast Guard discovers an old, abandoned sailboat named Mary. A crew led by a man named Merlin investigates the vessel, and while exploring inside, they hear a noise coming from a cabin. When they open the door, they are suddenly attacked by something that emerges from within. David, Sarah's husband, works as a helmsman for a tourist ferry. He visits a boatyard with his friend Mike, where a boat is going to be auctioned off. David notices a particular boat called the Mary and feels an immediate attachment to it, leading him to spontaneously decide to buy the boat. After purchasing the boat, David invites his wife Sarah and their 2 daughters, Lindsay and Mary, to come see their new acquisition. Sarah expresses her disapproval of his decision, but David explains that he wants to own a boat so he does not have to work his entire life. He envisions turning the boat into a vessel for family cruises. In response, Sarah points out that restoring the boat will require a significant financial investment. Later on, David expresses remorse to Sarah, admitting that he should have consulted her before making the decision to buy the boat. He finds it difficult to explain the strong impulse he felt to purchase the boat when he first encountered it. In the end, Sarah consents to David's plans, which brings him great joy. The following day, the family collaborates to restore the ship, receiving assistance from Mike and Tommy, who is Lindsay's boyfriend. They celebrate the successful completion of the restoration by performing a traditional launching ceremony, where they break a wine bottle over the boat. As night approaches, David announces their plans to set sail for Bermuda the next morning. However, David's former boss, Jay, tries to discourage him from embarking on the trip, cautioning him that Bermuda is not a safe destination. He voices his concerns about the ship, suggesting it seems haunted and mentioning that little is known about the previous owners, who mysteriously disappeared at sea. Despite Jay's warnings, David decides to disregard his advice. Later, while the family takes photos in front of the ship, Tommy spots a sudden flash of light emanating from it. Although he feels a twinge of fear, he chooses to dismiss it. That evening, as Sarah is putting Mary to bed, she is startled by a strange noise coming from outside. She cautiously approaches the window and catches a glimpse of a figure that bears an uncanny resemblance to Mary. However, when morning arrives, Sarah realizes that it was merely a vivid dream and not based in reality. The next day, the family sets off on their journey to Bermuda, and as they sail, they begin to enjoy quality time together. As the day wears on, Lindsay approaches Sarah to discuss their dinner plans and also brings up Jay's warnings about the trip. Sarah reassures Lindsay, downplaying Jay's concerns and attributing them to his intoxication. She convinces Lindsay that there is no substance to Jay's warnings and that they are perfectly safe. After this conversation, Sarah checks in on Mary and is surprised to find her room filled with a multitude of drawings. Among the artwork, Sarah notices a peculiar portrait of a woman that catches her attention. Later that night, David has a disturbing and unsettling dream about a woman, which abruptly awakens him from his sleep. As David tries to shake off the lingering fear from his dream, he notices that the ship has begun to drift off course. He goes up on deck to investigate and finds Tommy standing there, looking rather ominous. David asks Tommy why the anchor has been raised, and Tommy responds enigmatically, saying that she wants them to continue on their journey. In a shocking turn of events, Tommy suddenly becomes aggressive and attacks David. However, David manages to defend himself against the assault. In the aftermath of this incident, David decides that Tommy needs to be committed to a mental institution on the Abaco Islands. David and Sarah agree to keep this disturbing event a secret from the rest of the family, which leads to growing tension and unease in their relationship with Lindsay. Returning to the present, Detective Clarkson interrogates Sarah about her connection with Mike. Sarah maintains that she was not particularly close to him, explaining that he was more like a younger brother to David. Clarkson appears doubtful of her explanation and informs her that their discussion will continue after a break. She warns Sarah that if she wants to see her daughters again, she must provide a credible explanation for the circumstances. After Clarkson leaves, Sarah stares intently at the camera. On the ship, the protagonist sees a child walking by and initially thinks it is a girl named Mary. As she approaches a cabin, she notices wet footprints leading to a small closet. Curious, she opens the closet, but someone unexpectedly shoves her inside and slams the door shut. Striking a match for light, she briefly catches sight of a woman, but at that moment, David opens the door. David takes the protagonist to check on the children, assuring her that they have been sleeping for the past hour, and suggesting that her experience was merely a dream. The next morning, while the protagonist is setting up an internet device, Mary asks Lindsay about a mark on her neck. Lindsay brushes off the question and begins texting someone named Tommy. Suddenly, Lindsay feels a sensation on her neck, and, assuming it was Mary, looks around but finds no one there. Later, David tells the protagonist that Tommy, the person Lindsay was texting, has died by suicide the previous night, which deeply affects both of them. While the family is gathered, Mary suddenly says they forgot to prepare dinner for a lady. Lindsay tries to explain that Mary has an imaginary friend she talks to at night. Unexpectedly, Mary then smashes a glass against Lindsay's face, shocking everyone. David later reprimands Mary after finding a drawing of a hangman in her room. That night, the protagonist senses someone trying to open the door to their room, which frightens her. To calm down, she goes to the bathroom, where the lights start flickering, and she feels a presence trying to open the bathroom door. When she steps outside, she notices footprints on the floor, which prompts her to head up on deck. While on the ship's deck, the protagonist hears someone calling her name and is suddenly attacked. Fortunately, Mike arrives just in time to save her. Shaken by the incident, the protagonist tells David that something is wrong and suggests they should consider turning back. However, David insists they are too far from shore to return, even if they wanted to. When the protagonist expresses her belief that the ship is cursed, David becomes angry and storms off after shouting at her. The protagonist then enters the children's room, but hears a noise behind her. When she turns around, she finds that Mary has vanished. Suddenly, the protagonist is attacked and wakes up from the nightmare screaming. David rushes to comfort her, and shortly after, Mary appears, showing off a broken tooth. She proudly claims that a lady helped her pull it out. Later, the protagonist asks David if he has been having any dreams, but he remains silent and simply states that they will arrive in Hamilton by the next morning. Both the protagonist and David independently research the history of the boat and find that its previous owners had mysteriously vanished during similar voyages to the same destination. It becomes clear that the boat may be haunted by the spirit of a witch who is trying to reclaim her children after having been drowned. As their ship enters the Bermuda area, David instructs Mike to change their course. He then goes below deck to speak with Sarah, who presents him with the evidence she has gathered, insisting that Jay was correct. She argues that they should not have come here, as a witch is known to kill everyone who sails on the boat, and now they are at risk as well. David counters that he acquired the ship for the benefit of their family and wanted them to enjoy quality time together. This leads to another argument between them. Observing their conflict, Lindsay questions Sarah about why they didn't simply leave the ship if all of this is true. Sarah replies that the witch was preventing them from doing so. Back on the ship, David informs Sarah that their vessel is heading to the same destination as the previous owner's ship. At that moment, Lindsay approaches them, expressing concern that something is wrong with Mary. They find that Mary is completely cold, prompting David to instruct Mike to send out a mayday call. When he receives no response, David then goes above deck and discovers that the sails have been damaged. Suddenly, Mike attacks David, but Sarah rushes in to assist him. David manages to subdue Mike, knocking him unconscious and locking him in one of the cabins. The next day, they learn that Mike has sabotaged the ship by destroying the sails, the fuel tank, and throwing the satellite phone overboard. David confronts Mike, who reveals that he believes he and everything he loves now belongs to the witch. David urges him to remain calm, but Mike insists that he must obey the witch's commands and demands to be let out, suggesting that David should allow the witch to drown them. As David prepares to load his flare gun, he hears a noise and goes to investigate. He sees a shadowy figure in the water. Meanwhile, someone opens the door to Mike's cabin, waking Lindsay, who is startled to find that it is Tommy. Lindsay begins to follow Tommy and makes her way to the top deck, where she finds Tommy standing in a corner. Tommy urges Lindsay to commit suicide, and she is on the verge of doing so when David spots her and rushes over to catch her. Sarah soon joins them, and together they try to lead Lindsay away. However, Mike suddenly appears and attacks David. Sarah wakes up to find herself tied up and watches helplessly as Mike throws David overboard. He prepares to do the same to Sarah, but she manages to free herself and climbs back onto the ship. Although Sarah attacks Mike, he quickly gains the upper hand. Suddenly, David, who is still alive, appears and shoots Mike with a harpoon gun, causing Mike to fall into the water. Sarah then goes below deck to search for her daughters, Lindsay and Mary, and finally hears her daughters' voices coming from a cabin. She frees them and helps them into life jackets before sending them overboard while David navigates the boat. Before Sarah can escape, the witch attacks David, killing him. In a desperate move, Sarah fires the flare gun at the witch, resulting in an explosion that destroys the boat. Later, Sarah tells Detective Clarkson that she was thrown from the boat and tried to find her daughters, but was too weak. She mentions that she almost had the witch, but managed to destroy her. Detective Clarkson concludes that Sarah is a murderer and delusional, ordering her to be escorted away by a police officer. As she reviews the footage of the interrogation, Clarkson notices video distortions and realizes that Sarah is possessed by a witch. Hearing a noise from the room where Sarah was held, Clarkson discovers the officer who escorted her dead and finds that Sarah has escaped through the window. The final shot reveals the police station engulfed in a torrent,